Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are doing Mesechet Avodah Zarah, continuing on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Bet Amud Aleph. On the bottom of the Amud is going to be the last Shi'ur Bezat Hashem of Mesechet Avodah Zarah. 9 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Amar Rav Papa. Today's Amud is being learned L'Schut Refuah Shelma of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, who tomorrow morning has upcoming surgery, serious surgery that Bezat Hashem should go well, and shall refuah shelema. Amen. So we are amidst a question of the Gemara. What is the difference between our Mishnah in Ayin He Amud Bet and the Mishnah in Mesechet Zvachim Tzalivav of what you need as a process of hechsher for a kli that was used on fire without any liquids, a barbecue grill that was used by treif? How do you kosherize it? Our Mishnah seems to say that you have to do libun, which means you have to make it red hot on top of the fire, and that's the hechsher. Hagala does not work. And the Mishnah in Zvachim seems to clearly say that by kachim, which would become inevitably notar at some point, that the time frame that you're allowed to eat kochim has a specific shelf line, so to speak, as an expiration date. Once it gets to the expiration, it becomes treif. It becomes notar. Notar is asur mina Torah to eat. Is no different than pig. So therefore, if you waited on your grill after you shish kebab some nice basar kochim, then you have to kosherize your grill, just like a grill that was used with treif. But there, the Mishnah says that it's sufficient to do hagala. So it seems like a head-on collision of the two Mishnayot. What exactly is the pshat? The Gemara originally wanted to say, because one of them is hetera bala, the other one is isura bala, that by giule goyim, by the food from the goyim that was treif originally, what was absorbed in the kli was already treif. So you had a piece of treif food, and that's serious. But here, when it was used, the grill was used, it was completely kasher, it was basar kochim. But then afterwards, the taste, the traces of food, of tam, that went inside became notar. Mara asked questions on it. We went back and forth, different Amoraim, trying their luck and answering this stira, and now we have Rav Papa. Says Rav Papa Amar, Hai karid v'hai lo karid. You know what the difference is? The difference is, when you have white shirt and you have to wash them because they get dirty on the collar, a good balabasta knows that as soon as my husband takes it off, you have to spray it and wash it. Why? Because if you leave the stains there for a day or two, then they become part and parcel of the fabric. You cannot take them off anymore. But if a fresh stain comes out easy, stain is a stain. But at the end of the day, if you take it out right away, it's easy to take it out. If you don't take it out right away, even if every day you stain it, but the same day you wash it, it's much easier to maintain it than if you. So lavdil. That's what Rav Papa is saying. Rav Papa says that when by basar kochim, the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash are used constantly in use. Every day you're cooking something in there, and therefore what goes in comes out, goes in comes out. Constant travel of the traces of food inside the keli, and it's much easier to take them out when they're fresh, because they're never older than 1 day. So a fresh taste, it's easy to take out. It's like a fresh stain, you take it out easily. But by kele goyim, by the vessels of the goyim, we say stam kelim laf b'nei yoman. A regular kli avego, you could assume that was not used within 24 hours. So therefore, it's older and it gets absorbed deeply in the kli and dries up there, so to speak, becomes part and parcel of the kli, and no longer you could take it out. But rather you have to do libun chamur, which is burning it inside there. So says the Gemara, Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi, who is the author of the Gemara, basically Chatimat Talmud, the last word on everything. Rav Ashi says, Leolam K'damaran. The answer really is the very first answer that we gave. The very first answer we gave in the Gemara is the correct answer. That really the difference between Basar Kochim and treif food is exactly that. It's taref when the bliot happened. But why Basar Kochim, when he went in, it was kasher. Now, you had a question on this, says the Gemara. You remember, Rava asked a question. Rava said, who cares if when he went in was kasher? We care about when he comes out. That was the question we originally asked in the name of Rava. So it says the Gemara, Hacha hetera bala, hacha isura bala. By the way, this actually happens to be very halachic because, as we mentioned, when it comes to chametz on Pesach, you want to kosherize your oven on Pesach, for Pesach. And you're like, okay, so I warm up my pita bread in my oven on the racks periodically every week, whatever it is. And now I want to know if I could kosherize it for Pesach. Rabbi, do I have to put it on 550 broil, or do I need to do self-cleaning because I don't have self-cleaning oven? So what's the halacha? So this Gemara is basically the halacha for that. Because if you say that chametz is hetera bala, that when you had the warming up the pita bread on top of your racks in the oven, then bread was a year round. Bread was mutar. Right? It's not a tray food bread. Then you could say, well, it's hetera bala. Hagala is enough. So put it on 550. That's equivalent of doing hagala, and have a nice day. That's kasher. So long as there's no residue of food left. But if you say chametz is isura bala, because unlike kochim that changes and becomes by chametz is always asur on Pesach. It's a time frame. So if you would transport that time, that same bread to Pesach of Tafshin Bedalit, it will become taref also. So if you say chametz is isura bala, then your oven on Pesach, your racks in the oven for Pesach would need libun chamur. So therefore you will hear the rabbi always say chazaku baruch for all those who are scrubbing their ovens. But if you can actually run your oven through a process of libun chamur on a self-cleaning process, that's what you should do. If you don't have it, it's better to ask your neighbor to stick just your racks inside their oven and do libur chamur because of this, of hetera bala versus isura bala. So says Rav Ashi, wait a second. We had a question on this. The question was that who cares about if it was isura bala or hetera bala? At the end of the day, when you want to take out the taste of kochim from this kli, the kochim already is out of its time frame, it's notar. If you have tastes of shelamim, basar shelamim in the Beit HaMikdash, in a kli that stayed there for 2 days, now the kli is taref. You can't use the kli. So this is taref, that's taref. Who says it's different? So says the Gemara, and your question that you asked in the name of Rava, 6 lines up, the beidna de kapalit, that when it's getting rid of the bliot, of the traces of food inside that kli, isura kapalit, it's already notar, it's already treif. So says the Gemara, beidna de kapalit lo ite le isura beine. Gemara says no. Rav Ashi explains, says no. It's very different. When you have a chunk of meat which is treif, then the entire thing that went inside is tarif. Versus, you have different levels in treif. Not everything that's treif is created equally, right? So you have something that the mother piece of meat was tarif. That every bit of it, every fiber of it, strong existence of treif. But if you have a kosher meat, that it goes in, and then those weak traces of food that went in, they become technically not edible because of a time frame. That's a level lower, because they used to be kasher. Like, it's very weak traces that went inside by tam, and therefore that is a level lower, and hagala would suffice for that as well. Therefore, you don't have to be worried about it. It's basically Rav Ashi says there are two levels in bliot of treif. When something is mamash tarif, you take seafood and you make it in your dish. That is tarif from beginning. So every little weak, even bliot is tarif. I give you an example. The saberet ha'ozin, not exactly dome, but if you have tarif food that goes into your kli, and then within 24 hours you cook something in it, that food now is tarif. Right? You had pork, you treif, you had inside your kli. If Chacham Ovadia was there, he would say, if you had basar, that's not Bet Yosef. It was, if it's not halak Bet Yosef, it's tarif, right? Or it's not yashan, it's tarif. If you had non-kosher food in your kli, and then right afterwards you cleaned it up and you made a dish of rice, the whole thing is tarif. Not shishim and asur. But how about if I had meat, a regular meat dish I made, then I emptied it, I cleaned it up within 24 hours, right? And now I made something that is rice. I made rice, right? Can I eat that with my yogurt? Yeah. There's meat inside. That's noten tam bar noten tam. It's two-way travel. The traces have to go in and have to go out. It's weakened. So weakened tam of heter, it's not a big deal. Even if you would fuse right there with milk afterwards, you mamash cook it afterwards with milk. Nothing. It's kasher. Why? Because noten tam bar noten tam is fine. Not barnat de hetera, because the basar is still mutar after it came out. But if this would be a seafood, then the entire rice would be tarif, right? So this is not exactly the same, but it gives you the idea of traces of food being different than the regular thing. So let's go. Says the Gemara, how do you do libun? When you say red hot, what does red hot mean? It says, Amar Mani, ach tashir klipatan. Until you have to make it red hot, until the outer layer falls off. Now, everyone that has worked with metal before or watched it knows that when you heat metal to glow, then the process you put in cold water, and then if you see, they put it on a thing and they make one bang on it, and the outer klipa falls, like literally shells out, right? That's what happens when you heat it up to glow and then you put it in cold water to strengthen it, then the outer layer basically peels off. So that's what the Gemara says. Yerushalmi over here in Perek Hey, Halachat Tetvav, Avodah Zarah says you have to do it until sparks starts, like your red hot sparks start coming out of it. Fine. Right, that's the level. Now, by the way, Rav Moshe Feinstein in a Tshuva in Chelik Aleph of Yoreh De'ah, he asks, he says, wait a second, what happened to the general rule of kebol'o kach polto? We always say the way you take in the traces of food, the same way you give it out, right? If you did it with kli sheni, you do it kli sheni. If you did it with on fire with water, you do hagala. So what happened with that? You never cook on something that the pot is red hot. You should just laser heat thermometer the pot and say, okay, it heats up to 500 degrees and do 5. Why do you have to do it so hot? Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, because there are two different methods. This is no longer kebolo kach polto. Kebolo kach polto is up to hagala. When you have something that's used on fire and the bliot go in, they go in so fundamentally that you can no longer take it out with hagala. The only way to do it is to burn them where they are. You can no longer take them out. And to burn them where they are, you can only accomplish when all the layers of the metal are heated to the level of fire. That means when you're red hot, it's like fire. Therefore, it's burnt out. So says the Gemara, That's good for libun. How do you do a hagala? Says the Gemara. You take a small pot, you clean it well, you make sure there's no residue, you boil bubbling hot water in a larger pot, and you dip it inside. Fine. So the Gemara says, okay, that's good for yorah ketana. What do you do with yorah? If the biggest pot that you have became treif, then what do? You don't have a bigger pot to put it in, right? So it says Gemara, Tashma, Dahu Dura Davai Ber Rabakavya. Rabakavya had a massively large pot, and it became treif. And the way he kashered it was, Ahtar Legedanfa Delisha. He made a wall, an extra wall with dough. It made soft dough, and he made a little 1-inch additional wall on top of it from the outside. So imagine if this is the wall of the kli. He made another thing over here sticking out from the outside, leaving the lip, the edges inside, and then he filled it up to the top, including the water going on top of the edge, and then he boiled the water up. What does he accomplish? What it accomplishes is, now you have the entire pot in boiling water. Because the back of the kli, it's not necessary to be, when you have bubbling water inside, that does through and through. So that's covered. The only thing that's not covered is when you have hot sizzles of treif, that when you bubble something in a regularly full cup or pot, it sizzles on the edges, and you have sparkles of hot thing, sparkling on everything else. And you have to be also very careful with basar b'chalav, when you have a fleshik frying pan, and then you have next to it a milchik thing. You should be sure that it's happening, that the things are splashing. Just this past week over here, we had when they were making the food for Shabbat. And it was next to, they had to do it, they couldn't do downstairs, they did it next to the water urn. So I instructed the person to put a cardboard covering the urn, and afterwards I came started counting the splashes, because you could see the splashes of oil on the thing. I counted until almost 100, and I gave up. It wasn't even 1/3 of the splashes. I had small dots of splashes. So that happens, and that could treif up if it was treif. So then you have to cover the edges. So as long as you have a wall from outside, and now you can have water covering the edge, you're good to go. So that's what Rabakavya did. So says the Gemara, and he filled it up to the top, and he boiled it up. Amar Rava said, man chakim lemebad ki hai milta ilav Rabakavya de gavra Rabbahu. He says, what a genius chap. Only someone like Rabakavya could come up with such a smart way of kosherizing it without needing hagala in a larger pot. So nowadays, by the way, another way to do it is you stick it into the oven on 550, and that's equivalent of hagala as well. That level of heat, when you have what we call libun kal, a light libun, that the metal gets hot enough that if you put a paper on it, it will burn the paper. That will be accomplished almost by 500 degrees of heat, and that would be equivalent of hagala as well. So says the Gemara, says the Gemara, Rabakavya says Rabakavya held that kebolo kachpolto mabolo benitzosot, just like the edges of this pot have absorbed the treif food with the splashes of treif that has landed on them, af polto benisosot. The same way also he gives it out with hagala, but you don't know where they landed, so you just cover the entire area and you'll be good to go. Now, sakin, we said in the Mishnah, the last part of the Mishnah, that a knife, the way you kosherize it is, you stick it into ground 10 times, and that would be one way. Or shafa, you sharpen it, which takes a layer off, basically a very light layer off from the surface of the sakin. So said the Mishnah, sakin shafa v'u teora, you sharpen the knife and it is good to go. Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama. Rav Ukva Bar Chama said, "V'no asa hasara pa'amim bekarka." And also, that's not clear. Is it you sharpen it and you have to stick it in the ground, or you could alternatively, instead of sharpening it, you stick it to the ground. You stick it in the ground 10 times, bekarka. Amar Rav Huna bre Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna bre Rav Yeshua said, "Ubekarka sheno avuda." It has to be hard, natural ground, a ground that has not been worked and plowed and softened. But if you have a softened ground, that doesn't count. It has to be something that it's hard. You stick it with force, and that force cleans up the surface completely. And we do 10 times, all the layers of it basically becomes completely cleaned up. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kana. Rav Kana says another requirement. Ubesakin yafa. She'en bah gumot. And we're talking about a good, clean, nice, new sakin, which doesn't have bumps and cracks and holes and crevices. So therefore, when you stick it in, every bit of the surface is contacted with this harsh, pull or scrubbing process with the karka kasha. Now this, by the way, the Badei Shulchan brings that maybe steel wool or Scotch-Brite, something like that, will be equivalent of karka kasha. You don't have to necessarily go in the backyard and start doing that. Maybe you could have equivalent of that with what we have already in the kitchen. But be that as it may, it has to be something that doesn't have holes and crevices to make sure that every bit of isur that has stuck to the surface of the sakin has been cleaned up. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna bre Rav Yeshua, le'echol basonen, and this is only, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna bre Rav Yeshua, le'echol basonen. That's eating cold items, that the heat does not penetrate inside. You just want to make sure there's no residue of oil and grease from the tray food that has been used with. Therefore, rubbing it very strongly into the ground like that helps. So it says the Gemara, Kihai, the Mor Yehuda Ubati Bar Tuvi. This is a fascinating story in the Gemara, which has actually a lot of questions that are answered through this little story at the end of the Gemara. So we're going to leave this to finish it up, Bezat Hashem, tonight at the Siyum. See you, Bezat Hashem, all at the Siyum. Hazak Baruch for all those that have been with us through the months that we finished this Masechta, and looking very much forward to seeing all of you tonight at the Siyum. Hazak Baruch.